There's a lot of buzz about Republican presidential candidate Governor Mitt Romney. He has emerged as the leading fundraiser among Republican candidates. Governor Romney and his wife Ann are hitting the campaign trail here in Florida, and today the Romneys went on the record. Mrs. Romney, Governor, nice to see both of you.
Thanks, Greta. Good to be with you.
It's a tough business running for president. You've got to be physically fit and ready to go.
It's grueling in some respects because you're gone so much, you're traveling so much, but it's also invigorating. You meet really remarkable people. There are good people in this country. And you may forget that if you're just in your own little neighborhood day in and day out. You just know your neighbors. But across the country, you come away very much encouraged about the hopes and prospects for America.
What do you see when you go out there and campaign? Let me ask you, Mr. Romney, what do you see as like the single most important issue you think to most, to middle America? When I sit down at the dinner table at night.
Well, I know the issue that gets the most response where we are, even in Iowa, which is immigration right now.
And you're in favor of a fence, Governor?
Yeah, I'd like a fence, and I'd like to also make sure that we have an employment verification system so that we know who's here legally and who's not, who's able to work and who's not. And then we say to employers, here's this great system. You have a card that you can look at when people apply for a job. You put it in the computer database. It tells you if they're here legally, if they can work. And if you hire them when they're not supposed to be working, then the employer's at fault. And you go after them just like you would if they weren't paying their taxes.
Is it too late? I mean, a lot of people get the sense that I talked to, it's too late. We've got 12 million people here who may be illegal.
Well, but it's 800,000 or so a year that come in illegally. They keep on pouring in and pouring in. And we have some that go back as well. So stop the flow of those that come here illegally and do that with a fence and an employment system so we know who's legal and who's not. And once you take away the magnet of jobs here, people aren't going to come across the border unless they can get a legal and valid visa. And that's, of course, beneficial to the country. We love legal immigration. We just want to stop the illegal immigration.
So Mrs. Romney hears about immigration. When you talk to families, what do you hear in sort of middle America? What concerns them the most?
Well, that's, of course, one of the top issues that people speak about. But there's also a concern about schools, about health care. And I think underlying most people in America today is a concern about this jihad. We call it the war on terror, but it's the idea that there are radical Muslims who have as their intent the collapse of all moderate Islamic states and the collapse of the West as well. And they attacked us once. They've attacked us more than once. They're trying to do it again. And they want to make sure that their homeland is safe and their children and grandchildren will be safe. And it's going to take some real effort to make sure that's the case.
All right, let's take each one by one. Let's start with health care. A lot of Americans don't have health insurance. What's the plan if you're president?
Well, I like the idea of letting states have some flexibility to develop their own programs to get more and more people insured. We found a way to get everybody in our state, Massachusetts, insured. I like the plan. I think it's one of the best things we did in my administration. It's not perfect. We'll learn from it. But the idea is for people who can afford insurance, make sure they get their premiums down by taking mandates off insurance companies. Let the insurance companies offer true market-based products. And then for people who can't afford insurance, help them buy their own private policy. Don't put them on Medicaid. Get them private insurance. Get everybody in the system. It's a bit like bringing work to welfare. Bring personal responsibility to health care. Get the government out of the health care business for those 45 million uninsured and let individuals own their own policies.
Mrs. Romney, I assume that this health care is sort of near and dear. You've had health problems.
Yeah, I have.
And you look great.
I feel great. I'm healthy now, but I have been very sick at a point in my life, and thank goodness we had health coverage at that point. I know people feel desperate without it.
Yeah, I think it was probably the most challenging experience in our life was to have Ann diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. We wondered whether it would precipitate a complete collapse in her physical condition, but fortunately she has remained strong and has recovered a good deal. She has a form of MS known as relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, and so she's not threatened with a terminal illness at this point, but we always want to make sure that she stays strong and healthy.
Governor, you mentioned the jihad, the jihadists and people who may want to destroy others. In terms of Iraq, with 2020 hindsight, let me underline hindsight, would you, if you'd been president in March of 2003, have gone into Iraq?
Well, it's kind of an impossible setting to imagine because there's so many imponderables and so much we'd like to know before you'd ever consider committing our troops. But one thing I can tell you is that when the president made his decision, based upon the intelligence that existed then, from our own intelligence sources and around the world, I supported the president's action. And the question is, what do you do now? And how do you make sure that we get our troops out as soon as possible without precipitating a regional conflict that would cause us to have to go back in potentially a far more dangerous setting? And so I support the president's troop surge. I believe that al-Maliki has a plan that we can support to try and stabilize the civilization of the population in Iraq. I don't give it a 100% chance of success, but I think we'll know in a matter of months if it's working or not. If it's working, we can start bringing troops home.
Do you think enough questions were asked in March of 2003?
Yeah, I think the place where we really fell down in our planning was in preparation for what would happen after we knocked down Saddam Hussein. I think we underestimated the kind of mayhem that might ensue once insurgency started from surrounding nations, once people within Iraq itself began the sectarian violence between the Shia, the Sunni, and Kurds that also were affected, not to the same degree, of course. But those kind of developments would have suggested that we needed more troops. That if we were going to go in, we'd go in heavy, we'd lock down the country, we would secure its major assets, we would not be in a situation where we had the kind of unraveling of civil order that occurred. And so I think we were underprepared, underplanned, understaffed, certainly undermanaged with regards to the prison situation. We find ourselves in a very difficult position, in part because of the failures of our own preparation.
We're going to have much more of the Romneys in a moment, including the personal side. And coming up later, who bludgeoned an innocent American Peace Corps volunteer to death and why? The mystery of Julia Campbell's brutal murder is rocking the Peace Corps to its